Gaming Bolt presents 15 best boss fights in the entire Mass Effect series. Say what you will about Bioware's handling of the franchise, especially with its most recent entry, but Mass Effect remains highly decorated. The original trilogy delivered tight, action-packed adventures with memorable characters and missions, and though Andromeda wasn't perfect, it had its share of highlights. Of course, memorable boss battles are included, so let's take a look at the 15 best boss fights throughout the entire Mass Effect series. LENG, Final Battle, Mass Effect 3. A constant thorn in Shepard's side, you battle LENG one final time in the Elusive Man's headquarters. LENG can be quick and closes the gap to deal heavy melee attacks that are fatal if you don't mash the melee button. Fighting from a distance helps, but LENG will also employ nemesis and assassins to back him up. Bringing EDI and Liara can make the battle easier, and sooner than later LENG will fall. Tela Vasir, Mass Effect 2, Lair of the Shadow Broker. The coolest part about Tela isn't that she's a Spectre who also isn't a pushover. It's the entire sequence of events, from chasing her through Ilium and Skykars and finally battling her after a devastating crash. Dealing with her biotic charges, especially as she dashes all over the place, can be difficult, but abilities like Stasis and Warp make the fight easier. Of course, you could also pull her off the map, ending the battle instantly and before the Shadow Broker mercs start pouring out. Shadow Broker, Mass Effect 2, Lair of the Shadow Broker. Though relegated to DLC, the entire mission and final encounter with the Shadow Broker is tons of fun. Anti-armor and anti-shield weapons are your best friend against the Yogg. At some point, flanking around behind his shield will be necessary to deal damage. Once his shields are gone, it's a simple matter of meleeing him in a dramatic fashion. By the time it's over, Liara becomes the Shadow Broker in a fitting end to his reign. EOS Architect, Mass Effect Andromeda. As a whole, Mass Effect Andromeda didn't have many good boss fights. However, as simple as the Architects were, they were fun to tackle. The EOS Architect starts things off simple, introducing the basic tenets of fighting these gargantuan machines. Shoot the weak points on its legs, then shoot its mouth. Remnant forces including observers and nullifiers will show up to the fight, but ultimately, after dealing enough damage to the Architect, it will move on to a new location. Repeat this process enough times and it goes down. Thresher Maw, Mass Effect 2. Thresher Maws aren't typically enemies to fight on foot, but that's exactly what Shepard and crew will be doing in Grunt's loyalty mission. It's far enough to avoid being smashed to bits, but avoiding its acid spit is important, especially since it melts all but 2 pillars on the platform. Hiding behind those, taking down its armor, Warp is highly effective for this, and surviving are of paramount importance. Reaper, Priority RANNOCH, Mass Effect 3. Starting from the revelation that the entire base is a Reaper, Priority RANNOCH's boss fight starts as a frantic escape and turret sequence. Orbital bombardment from the Normandy has no effect, at first, and Shepard is subsequently left to target the Reaper with airstrikes to bring it down. The actual battle involves dodging left or right to avoid the Reaper's beam, but the precise aiming needed for the targeting laser makes this battle challenging. SAREN, Mass Effect. Arguably one of the best villains in Mass Effect history, SAREN can be quite the doozy when fighting on the Citadel. Along with flying on a hovercraft, he uses biotic attacks while being immune to many of yours. Perhaps one of the advantages Shepard has is that SAREN focuses primarily on him, leaving other squadmates to attack uninterrupted. At one point, you get the option to convince him that he's indoctrinated. This leads to SAREN killing himself, but things are never that easy. SAREN HUSK, Mass Effect. Sovereign will resurrect SAREN in HUSK form, and he's much more devastating. Increased speed, frequent tech powers like sabotage, and a high health pool make this a tough fight. The key is to keep moving and locking him in place with stasis once his shields are down. Warp can also be used to increase damage dealt, thus leading to a quicker victory. Matriarch Benezia, Mass Effect. If you walk into this fight unprepared, then Matriarch Benezia laid down the hurt. She's flanked by Asari commandos who can easily gun Shepard down while Benezia locks the squad with stasis. Focusing on the commandos isn't the worst tactic, but it's generally better to equip Hammerhead and Sledgehammer rounds, hit Benezia with lift, and deal as much damage as possible in a short period. Human Reaper Larva, Mass Effect 2. So this fight isn't necessarily the greatest battle in Mass Effect 2, especially given the shocking discovery behind it. A Human Reaper? Say it isn't so, Harbinger. Unfortunately, it's mostly a matter of shooting the glowing weak spots and not standing on platforms that the human Reaper knocks down. The sheer spectacle of the fight is nice, if a somewhat easy cap-off to the suicide mission. Clone, Mass Effect 3 Citadel. Despite everyone having so much banter during the Citadel DLC, the battle with Shepard's clone is unique. The clone will mirror your class and change up the tactics accordingly. For instance, an infiltrator relies on cloaking, while a soldier uses fortification, grenades, and concussive shot. Throw in immunity to some powers, a strong shield, and a tracking attack with damage over time, and this clone is a formidable foe. Kadara Architect, Mass Effect Andromeda. Much like the Architect on EOS, defeating the Kadara Architect requires shooting its legs, then the weak point in its head, and fighting off several remnants in the process. The only real challenging part is when the fight moves to an area with reasonably less cover. Prepare beforehand and keep a sniper rifle handy so you can deal tons of damage very quickly. Eladen Architect, Mass Effect Andromeda. Did we mention already that the boss fights in Andromeda aren't exactly the best? It also bears repeating that while the Architects are all basically the same fight, they are still the best in the game. Anyway, you know the drill, shoot its legs, then its head, and destroy any incoming remnant. Depending on how damaged its legs are, you'll need to move on to another location before it ultimately dies. Voeld Architect, Mass Effect Andromeda. Fortunately, not all Architect battles play out the same way. The Architect on Voeld is challenging simply because of the environment. Your life support will take a beating if you're not careful, but retreating into nearby Ket camp will help recharge it. Managing life support while putting enough damage on the Architect is the only really tough part about this fight. Otherwise, it should be wrapped up fairly quick. Final Battle, Priority Earth, Mass Effect 3. Though not technically a boss battle, this is pretty much the last stop until Mass Effect 3's ending. To that end, contending with numerous brutes and banshees, who are some of the hardest hitting enemies in the game, can be tough. Throw in 6 brutes, a ravager, and up to 3 banshees, and you have quite the fight on your hands. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.